Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We didn't have the bell ring here today, which is a little bit weird at school. Um, I'm just taking this moment to quickly take attendance as people are joining. All right, we're at 22, so I'm going to go get started with the class just so that we have a chance to get everything in and maybe have a few minutes extra at the end. We'll see. Okay, so can go ahead and take over your screens. Just want to say again, when you get to class, please have your video on so that at least I know you're here in person. And then after that, I'm okay with you, turning it off if that's more comfortable for you. But at least have it on at the beginning of class, please. All right. Yesterday we had a handful of people that were absent, so I just wanted to take an opportunity for those of you that were not here to show you what we did in class. So if you go back, as always, to modules, you're going to see current events, and you're going to see the current event project 2020. So if you were not here yesterday, we talked about this in class and we reviewed it, and then we picked topics. So period one, it appears that Chris, Jordan, Xavier, Jacob, Brendan, Ian, Kamira, and Ranisha all need to still pick topics. And so once we're done at the end, you can send me a private message with the topic that you would like to present to the class. Reminder, it can't be the same as anybody else. Okay. All right. So the other thing then is I had a handful of people email me and ask me when all this was due. So not today, but either Wednesday or Thursday, we're going to be signing up for a date. And so we'll start presentations on October 16th, as you can see on the screen here. And we'll finish up presentations on the 11th of December. So it's what seems like a long period of time, but it's every Friday. We'll have 3 or 4 after we take our quiz, and it goes by pretty quick. All right, so on that note, going to go ahead and minimize this, but for those of you who still need to sign up, again, you have an opportunity to. If you don't end up signing up for anything, you'll just take a 0 out of 80 on the project. So probably want to do that at some point. All right. Also then a reminder, just so you guys are aware of what's going on. Intro number 8, which is about China, is due tomorrow at 10:59 a.m. That's the end of period 3. All right. So this is going to be due Wednesday, period 3, at the end of period 3. So hopefully you got a good start on that yesterday, and you are, or you can do it this afternoon, this evening, whatever you want to do. Okay. The notes with a little bit of modification are coming from right here as well. Week number 8 notes. So if that is something that you want to print out, you can print that out, and you can have the notes, and you can use those on your quiz, obviously. So that's helpful to have. All right. We're going to go ahead and get started then. Just wanted to make sure everyone was on the same page. And here we go. All right, so I'm not going to have you enter anything into a text box or anything, but I'm curious what you guys already know about China. So old or new, okay? Things that you've heard of about ancient China or China in general, even current day China. If we can avoid Szechuan chicken or Kung Pao chicken, not talk about food, but just put in what you know. In fact, what I want you guys to do is go ahead and type that in the text box or in the chat box, and let's see what you guys know. Yeah, I'm curious. Okay, take 90 seconds or so to brainstorm here, and I'm going to finish taking attendance.
You want us to write in the chat?
Yes, sir. All right, let's go ahead and see what we've got here. So, first to make gunpowder. Almost everything in our house is made in China. Ancient China had many dynasties. At one point, they got invaded by the Huns. Question mark. Good. You've seen the movie Mulan. China belongs to the continent of Asia. Good. Most of America's material comes from China. Good. About 1.4 billion people live there. Good. Great Wall. Flooding. Ancient emperors used to drink and bathe in mercury. Yeah, we'll take a look at that a little bit today. They're the largest population in the world. They're overpopulated. They had silk. Okay, you guys pretty good there. Pretty spot on. I should print that off and save it because that's going to be hard for any of the other classes to match that. Nice. All right. So today we are definitely talking about the first four Chinese dynasties. All right. So going from the River Valley Civilization, which was called the Shang or the Yellow River Valley Civilization, to the first four Chinese dynasties. Can anybody name the first four Chinese dynasties without looking it up? Do I have any Chinese historians here? No. All right. So the first four Chinese dynasties in order would go Shang, Zhou, Qin, and Han. Did someone type that? Oh, we had the Zhou dynasty. That's good. So Shang, Zhou, Qin, Han. So that's what we're going to take a look at today. If you guys take a look at the screen, Shang is in the upper left. That's going to be the first family to claim what's called the Mandate of Heaven. And that was the idea that the God said that they were, that family was meant to rule over the Middle Kingdom. Then you have the Zhou dynasty. It's spelled Z-H-O-U, but it's a hard J. Zhou. Okay. And then subsequently larger, you see the Qin dynasty and the Great Wall. Not totally established, but there. And then underneath, after the Qin, you probably have the most famous, and that's the Han dynasty. So Shang, Zhou, Qin, and Han. And it's pretty easy to recognize that they all get larger as they expand, take over more land. Now, it's kind of crazy if you look on these maps to see that modern day China is much larger than these first four dynasties. Okay, something to think about. All right, moving on here. So, the Zhou dynasty conquered the Shang family or the Shang dynasty. Dynasty is just a family of rulers. And when they did that, they claimed their rule under what's known as the Mandate of Heaven. All right. And if you haven't written that down, or if you're taking notes and you're just writing down key highlights, that's definitely something for you to jot down. Okay. And so the mandate of heaven is this concept known as the dynastic cycle. Okay. Dynastic comes from the word dynasties. And what it means is that when the gods were favoring an emperor, that emperor and that family ruled well. The peasants lived well. There was plenty of food for everyone. Trade was pretty good, and things were safe. And then once that family or set of rulers from that family lost the mandate of heaven, things started to go poorly. Typically, there's a peasant rebellion, there's flooding, dams, dikes aren't controlled, and then a new family comes in and overthrows the old family. All right, that's known as the mandate of heaven and the dynastic cycle. Okay, probably want to jot those two things down. Mandate of heaven, dynastic cycle. Now, the entire history of China can be told through this whole idea of the mandate of heaven. You guys ready for this? I'm only going to sing one time. Shang Zhou Qian Han, Shang Zhou Qian Han, Sui Tang Song, Sui Tang Song, Yuan Ming Qing, Yuan Ming Qing, Mao Zedong, Mao Zedong. So, all the Chinese dynasties kind of follow the same whole cyclical idea of the mandate of heaven. And the last one, if you heard me, was Mao Zedong. He ruled, he took over rule in 1949. And today, China is still somewhat of a, I would call it like a dictatorship, but a faux communist state. It's not really communist. But Mao rules like a lot of emperors did. So they say it's kind of the same cycle. All right. The Zhou would rule, and probably the first people in ancient cultures, and we're going to see this a lot of times, and you've probably heard of it, but they would rule using this system called feudalism. Because they couldn't control all of that land, at a time in which raising armies was very important, and making sure like noble families weren't taking all the power, they set up feudalism. And so it's an agricultural system which nobles owned the land and the peasants worked it. And then the nobles got their land from the king. And typically the king made his friends and family the lords and gave them control over cities and states and again, in land. And then these people had their own authority to raise an army and to control the peasants. Okay, we call feudalism. It shouldn't say decentralization. It should say decentralization. It's a typo. It's my fault. So it's a decentralized government, meaning if you look on the little diagram, yes, like the king would be the emperor, the knights and the lords would be his friend, and then they keep the peasants safe, and in return, the peasants give the knights and lords food. And in return, the knights and lords give the king protection. They raise armies for him. So it's a set of mutual relationships. Is it a good government? No. But did it last a long time? It did for the Zhou. Whoops. Yeah. The only thing that eventually ends up happening, though, is that lords end up kind of going rogue and ending up with more power from the king. And then that ends up in some kind of rebellion. And so you'll notice off and on, like the Eastern Zhou, Eastern would be right on your screen, is going to last all the way until technically 221 BC. So like 800 years. Okay. But in reality, even though it was called the Zhou dynasty, they didn't have a real strong emperor, and the position of emperor wasn't all that powerful. At the same time, there were a bunch of different philosophical schools that came about that we're going to talk about, like Confucianism, Taoism, and legalism, which were schools that were meant to try to fix China and bring it together. The one that would end up having the most, basically would end up being most famous and still is very much a part of China today, is known as Confucianism, from Confucius, the philosopher. Now, the Qin family, and it's spelled like the chin on your chin. Yes, this thing right here. Okay. The Qin family would conquer the Zhou, and the Qin ruler, who called himself the first emperor, took on the name Qin Shi Huangdi. Okay. Qin Shi Huangdi is known as the first emperor of China. And that's because he establishes the authority as a very important person in Chinese history. And he's ruthless. Okay. He's known for his order and centralization, meaning things ran through him and he was the boss. Okay. He did some remarkable stuff for China, but he killed millions of people when he did it also. Okay. Here you can see a picture of the Qin Shi Huangdi. I don't think you'd want to ruffle feathers with this guy. He doesn't look very nice. He might eat you. Now, that takes us to the first emperor, Qin Shi Huangdi. Okay, so he brought most of the nation out of this feudal state and the large landowning families. He basically made them move to his capital, which then he could keep an eye on them half the year, and so they didn't. There was no rebellions. His rule was brutal, but effective because he was able to get a lot of large-scale projects done, like the Great Wall. The centralization, like bringing of everything centralized, would result in China getting its name, like I said, from the Qin. And then instead of giving away family land like the Zhou did, he divided up China into military districts, put on his own people that were of merit, meaning that they like promoted people that were smart and successful, not just friends, to become the military leaders of these districts. Okay, one of the most famous things then that he did was in that time around 300 BC, China was the world's leader in trade, and Qin Shi Huangdi standardized coins, weights, and measures so that all merchants around China could trade equally. This is also then where you see the character system of the Chinese is standardized. So I can't remember the number, 300 plus characters. Don't quote me on that. Becomes like their actual writing system. It's very difficult to learn. And then he sets up a law code, but it's really, really strict. And if you disobey him, he'll send you off to a project to die. So a lot of the projects they did, like building canals and roads and the Great Wall and his tombstone or his tomb, were all created from basically from peasants who he forced to work. Instead of paying taxes in grain, they paid taxes in labor. All right, so the Great Wall was not totally finished, but much of it was erected during this period. You can see it's the longest continuous wall in the world, and you can see it from space. And it was meant to keep out invaders that were not ethnically and technically Chinese out of Chinese civilization, especially in the north and the northwest. Another thing that he's known for then, I wanted you guys to see, and this is what it looks like. These are known as the Terracotta Warriors, okay? But here's a little bit of story on the first emperor, Qin Shi Huangdi. It's about a 3-minute clip. I think you guys will like this.
I've been waiting to unbox this for a long time.
What happens after death? Is there a restful paradise? An eternal torment? A rebirth? Or maybe just nothingness? Well, one Chinese emperor thought that whatever the hereafter was, he'd better bring an army. We know that because in 1974, farmers digging a well near their small village stumbled upon one of the most important finds in archaeological history: vast underground chambers surrounding that emperor's tomb and containing more than 8,000 life-size clay soldiers ready for battle. The story of the subterranean army begins with Ying Zheng, who came to power as the king of the Qing state at the age of 13 in 246 BCE. Ambitious and ruthless, he would go on to become Qin Shi Huangdi, the first emperor of China, after uniting its 7 warring kingdoms. His 36-year reign saw many historic accomplishments, including a universal system of weights and measures, a single standardized writing script for all of China, and a defensive barrier that would later come to be known as the Great Wall. But perhaps Qin Shi Huang dedicated so much effort to securing his historical legacy because he was obsessed with his mortality. He spent his last years desperately employing alchemists and deploying expeditions in search of elixirs of life that would help him achieve immortality. And as early as the first year of his reign, he began the construction of a massive underground necropolis filled with monuments, artifacts, and an army to accompany him into the next world and continue his rule. This magnificent army is still standing in precise battle formation and is split across several pits. One contains a main force of 6,000 soldiers, each weighing several hundred pounds. A second has more than 130 war chariots and over 600 horses. And a third houses the high command. An empty fourth pit suggests that the grand project could not be finished before the emperor's death. In addition, nearby chambers contain figures of musicians and acrobats, workers and government officials, and various exotic animals, indicating that Emperor Qin had more plans for the afterlife than simply waging war. All the figurines are sculpted from terracotta, or baked earth, a type of reddish-brown clay. To construct them, multiple workshops and reportedly over 720,000 laborers were commandeered by the emperor, including groups of artisans who molded each body part separately to construct statues as individual as the real warriors in the emperor's army. They stand according to rank and feature different weapons and uniforms, distinct hairstyles and expressions, and even unique ears. Originally, each warrior was painted in bright colors, but their exposure to air caused the paint to dry and flake, leaving only the terracotta base. It is for this very reason that another chamber less than a mile away has not been excavated. This is the actual tomb of Qin Shi Huangdi, reported to contain palaces, precious stones and artifacts, and even rivers of mercury flowing through mountains of bronze. But until a way can be found to expose it without damaging the treasures inside, the tomb remains sealed. Emperor Qin was not alone in wanting company for his final destination. Ancient Egyptian tombs contain clay models representing the ideal afterlife. The dead of Japan's Kofun period were buried with sculptures of horses and houses, and the graves of the Jana Island off the Mexican coast are full of ceramic figurines. Fortunately, as ruthless as he was, Emperor Qin chose to have servants and soldiers built for this purpose, rather than sacrificing living ones to accompany him, as had been practiced in Egypt, West Africa, Anatolia, parts of North America, and even China during the previous Shang and Zhou dynasties. And today, people travel from all over the world to see these stoic soldiers, silently awaiting their battle orders for centuries to come.
All right, some of you might have had the opportunity to see them when they were at the Children's Museum a couple years ago. But what the video failed to mention was all the artisans and laborers that worked on this, on these 6,000 plus soldiers and war chariots and everything, because they wanted to keep the location a secret, they were all killed once the emperor took mercury pills and to give himself, thinking that he was going to give himself eternal life, he poisons himself to death essentially. And so they're all killed. They don't find this until 1974. And to this day, like it says, they haven't even unearthed the palace, which they think has all sorts of treasures and whatnot, but is most likely booby trapped. So pretty cool. All right, Now, the Qin in their short reign, even though they did some of the most famous stuff in Chinese history, like build the terracotta warriors and connect a lot of the Great Wall, they were really harsh. They ruled with this thing called legalism. So yeah, I know that's not on the slide right now, but if you want to write legalism in your notes, I think that would be good for you. He taxed the landowners pretty hard, and the people that had freedom before he ruled lost it. The aristocracy, that's the rich, didn't like him. He didn't always put like his friends in power, but he put educated people, and so because of that, the people that he put in power, they owed their loyalty to him, and they did whatever he said. And then these philosophical schools like Confucianism and Taoism, which will be very important parts of Chinese culture, if you were associated with these schools or like a scholar, you were put to death, okay, or you were sent to the Great Wall to die, because he didn't want these philosophers and educated people, scholars, to spread messages that he was bad. All right, so that's going to lead to the Qin dynasty lasting not very long. Okay, most people saw him as a tyrant, meaning, a guy who took all the power. And so the nobles was mad that he destroyed their position and their position of being landowners. The peasants were mad that they had to pay their taxes and labor. The scholars and the philosophers were mad that he burned their books and killed a lot of them as well. And so he only rules for approximately 20 plus years, not too many. But when he dies, there's going to be a revolt, and that ushers in probably the dynasty that you've heard of before, and that's known as the Han Dynasty, Han. Okay. And the Han Dynasty is going to rule for more than 400 years. And when they rule, it's almost the exact same time as the rule of the Roman Empire. Got a question here. Someone asked, is the PowerPoint on Canvas? Yes, it's on Canvas under week 8 notes. So it's there for you. Again, if you want to download it, you can. All right. So the Han Dynasty rules for 400 years. They actually are larger than the Qin. If you look, you have a lot more expansion on the left side of the map. That's going to be because of the Silk Trade route. And I put this in 3 exclamation points, which probably means it's important. They founded the largest, most effective, and most enduring bureaucracy in the pre-industrial world. Now, if you're not sure what the word bureaucracy means, that's just another word for government, okay? The largest, most effective, and most enduring, that means the longest lasting government in the pre-industrial world. So that means before the Industrial Revolution. And they did that by creating what's called civil service exams. Civil service exams were examinations that officials had to take in order to become part of the government. We'll talk about that here in a second. So what you see here is, again, large extension, armies against the nomads. This is going to lead to trade, and this is going to lead to like the first time that India, Arabia, even North Africa, and then really all over the Roman Empire, which is North Africa and Europe, are connected via the Silk Trade route. And the reason why it's called the Silk Trade route was that silk and then Chinese pottery, which is called like porcelain and silk, became the 2 most coveted products on the Silk Trade route. And so they would be traded for like Indian cotton, indigo from India, some hemp, and then they would get to Europe, and the Europeans did not have much to send back. And so typically the Europeans were paying in coins, in order to get Chinese goods. And so China made a lot of money and then was able to reinvest it into their armies, and, and they were very profitable. Okay, here's a good example for you guys of the Silk Trade Route. A lot of you have seen it before, but before Columbus and Vasco da Gama would sail, to the Americas and then around the tip of Africa, this was the dominant trade route in the world all the way up until 1450 CE. Porcelain, you see the blue ceramic here. That's when it mixed with Iran near Guangzhou, and then Hangzhou, silk, hemp. You can see what comes out of India. Constantinople is Istanbul today, and that's kind of where the choke point of the end was. Okay, but not only were these kinds of like handicrafts exchanged, but you also had the exchange of ideas like religions and whatnot as well. All right, so this ushers in what we call the Pax Sinica. Okay, Pax is a Latin word for peace. Sinica is the Latin word for China. So Pax Sinica means the peace of China. And this was, again, a period of about 400 years when you saw China take the lead in having the best government and having the strongest economy. And they were able to store away grain. So when there was a bad harvest or when there was a large drought, they had enough grain to feed the population for years. And then government jobs were not given out by like whose last name you had. So, there wasn't like a popularity chain of command. It was by ability. Okay. And so you had to pass this test called the civil service exam in order to work for the government. And these exams were all based off of Confucian teaching. And you had to be able to memorize thousands and thousands of characters. Okay, you basically had to memorize Confucius' teachings, and then you had to be able to apply them to problems also. Problems like, how to fix society, etc. Because it was so expensive you had to basically, starting at the age of 8 to 18, you would sit in your house and work on memorizing characters, and you'd have a tutor, and tutors were usually the people who failed the exams, and so then they would become tutors because they had nothing else they could do. And because of this, it was really expensive. I mean, people would build separate part of their houses where the tutoring would occur, and it definitely favored the upper class, but it still was more fair than just putting the rich in power. And this type of government lasted, from about 200 BC all the way until the 1900 CE. So it was just a little over 100 years ago, they stopped giving civil service exams. That's how long this lasted. All right. On top of that, then, because of the economic prosperity and peacefulness, you have a massive amount of things that were created. Okay, so animal medicine, veterinary medicine, irrigation systems, fertilizer. I don't know if your parents if you guys have like a garden or anything, you use fertilizer, but figured out how to use manure, which is poop, to put it back in the crops to make the soil, better. Canals, roadways, silk, paper is pretty important. Gunpowder is pretty important. I think the wheelbarrow is awesome. They created basically the early start of printed books, movable block printing, suspension bridge, which was, we still use those today, and then the compass, and then iron drill bits. Okay, you put them on the end of a drill, they're a lot more sturdy than just like a piece of stone. Okay, some of this stuff that they created, you guys can see on here, is stuff that we still use every day, and will be obviously changed, but it's pretty important to the history of the world. Yeah, obviously the compass, books, gunpowder, paper, pretty big. All right, now, last but not least here, the fall of the Han, came from the Huns. Some of you have seen the movie Mulan before. I know it's coming out again here in the expensive Disney version, but almost all of the classical civilizations were destroyed by the Huns. Okay. And that would be the Romans had issues with the Huns. The Gupta in India had issues with the Huns, and so did the Han Chinese. All right. And so what ends up happening is China is broken up back into like warlords and states, and it's not unified again for another 300 plus years. Okay, which will usher in a time when China again is way ahead of Europe, called the Tang and the Song dynasties. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and leave you guys here. I hope you guys enjoyed that. A little bit of brief history on China. And
Hey, shut your bitch ass up, you jerk body and big ass bitch nigga. I'll smack the shit out of you. The fuck? You built like.
I need you guys to, if you have not, I need you to stay on here if you haven't signed up for your topic yet here. And then if you are, if you have already signed up, you're free to leave. You've got about 7 or 8 minutes to work on your intro that's due tomorrow. Okay. And you'll turn it on, you'll turn it in under week number 8 module as well. Okay. So anybody that wants to leave can. If you still need to sign up for a topic, you can see on my screen what's been chosen and what hasn't. I would ask you to stay here and go ahead and pick your topic.
Wait,
All right. Anybody here have a topic choice?
Can I get conspiracies on fires in California?
What about the fires?
Like the conspiracies.
bitch, oh my mama, bitch, I'll suck the shit out of you, bitch. You look like a orangutan titties and throw up. Boy, you little ugly.
Hey, Layla. Okay. Brendan, did you say the conspiracy?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Got it. All right, anybody else?
Can I do transgender rights?
Who is it?
Ian.
Yeah, that sounds good. Make sure you look at the project and all that goes with it, okay?
All right.
Okay. Anybody else? Jacob, do you have one?
Like the NFL season if they get canceled or something.
So you want to just do like NFL and how they're dealing with COVID
Yeah.
compared
And like when fans will come back and stuff.
compare it to like college football and MLB and pro basketball.
No.
Is that good?
Yeah.
Okay. Jordan, do you have one?
No, I haven't found one. I don't really understand.
So you see how people have picked different topics. These are kind of all topics that are in the news right now or are current issues in our world. They can be local or global or just in our country. And then you're going to write a research paper on it. You're going to find a couple YouTube videos, and then you're going to make a slideshow, and you're going to be presenting it in front of the class. Your topic can really be whatever you want it to be. So if there's something that's of interest to you, then yeah, go ahead and take it. If you want to think on it and tell me tomorrow, that's fine too. Do you want another day or so to think about it?
Can I do the NBA and the Black Lives Matter movement while being in the bubble?
Yeah. Good. That sounds good. Thanks. Chris or Kanan, do you guys need anything?